What is up, guys? Rick Kakas here, and today we're going to be discussing Trials of the Nine in Destiny 2 and the fact that Trials is in trouble. Now, Trials of the Nine was touted as the premier PvP activity in the game. It's essentially the end game for PvP players. Bungie envisioned every PvP player kind of gearing up and getting ready to run Trials every weekend. That really was the case going back to Trials of Osiris in Destiny 1. But like I said, Trials of the Nine is in big trouble. Now here's why. Last weekend, which was Survival on Javelin 4, the player population struggled to reach over 100k unique players. And I'm sure you guys have noticed this incidentally without having to actually hear the stats because you match with the same teams. I know the last couple of times I've played Trials, I've matched with the same team we've just beaten multiple times. And of course, if you match against someone who's already beaten you, that is incredibly frustrating, and that obviously shouldn't happen. It only does happen when there's a very small pool of teams that Bungie can select to match against you, and that's exactly what's happening here. By the end of the weekend, the total number of Guardians that played Trials that weekend was 162,800. And this information is coming from the website Trials Report, which is a stat tracking website. There's no reason whatsoever to not trust the legitimacy of this site. It's been right about literally everything else. So, 162,800. This number is why Trials right now is dead, if not just dying. Things are really bad because we need to compare this with Destiny 1. So this weekend took place over New Year's, essentially. So you may be thinking, well, it's New Year's. People are out having fun. They're out with friends and family. They're not going to be playing Trials. And that's a very fair point. However, perfectly for this comparison, back in the 2017 New Year, there was a weekend at the exact same time. It started, the Friday was December 30th. So we had New Year's on the Sunday, with the Saturday, of course, being all the New Year's parties happening. Now, that Trials, back in 2017 New Year, that attracted 297,839 unique Guardians. So nearly 300,000, which is almost double of the same people that are logging on in Destiny 2 exactly 1 year ago. And if we go back even further, December 25th weekend, 2015, 398,182 unique players, and January 1st weekend, 2016, 361,605 players. So we're getting a trend here. Under essentially the same conditions a year apart, there's double, not just like a little bit more, actually double the amount of players playing Trials of Osiris at the time than are playing Trials of the Nine now. In fact, that number of 162,000 Guardians that tuned in last weekend, well, when did Destiny 1 ever go below that point? When did Destiny 1 compare with 162,000 Guardians? Well, this is going to put everything into perspective, I'm telling you. The only time Destiny 1's player base for Trials of Osiris dipped below 162,000 was only about 2 weekends at the very, very tail end of the lifespan of Destiny 1. The first time it ever dropped below, it went from 180,000 players, then it finally dropped below to 146,435 players on the weekend of July 21st, 2017. But here's the thing, something was happening that weekend because again it dropped from 180,000 players down to 140,000 players, which is a pretty big gap. Well, the weekend of July 21st, guess what? The day before, the Thursday before, had just begun. The Destiny 2 beta became an open beta on July 20th, 2017. So that weekend, the only weekend, the first weekend that the Destiny 1 Trials population dropped below 160,000 Guardians, which is what we're getting right now. There was the Destiny 2 beta ongoing. That is insane. That was the only thing that could get the player base below that point. So, with all those stats out of the way, of course, this is a huge problem. The fact that Destiny 2 came out not years and years ago, because the numbers that are doubling the player base that we're comparing right now, Destiny 1 had already been out for years, right? Destiny 2 came out, heck, in September, and we just got a new expansion in December, adding new loot to Trials of the Nine. These are all things that should make the player population go up, not down, and yet it's incredibly low. Almost as low as the lowest point ever throughout 3 years in Destiny 1. And again, the only time it's ever lower is when the Destiny 2 beta is ongoing. There was year spans in between of the Taken King expansion and then when Trials finally got updated and the first next full expansion with the Rise of Iron. In between the Rise of Iron and the Taken King was a massive gap where Trials was essentially unchanged, and yet the player population was still consistently more than double what it is right now in Destiny 2. And more people bought Destiny 2 than they did Destiny 1. So this just doesn't make any sense, stat-wise. So, now that we've really proven with the hard statistics that Trials of the Nine is suffering, that it's hemorrhaging players, even though there's going to be people in the comment section disagreeing, saying, I don't believe in numbers or something, we need to talk about why is this the case? Why is this happening? Like, this is absolutely insane values we're getting, so why is the player base hemorrhaging people? Well, there is a lot we could talk about. We could talk about the PvP design philosophies. We could spend 20 minutes easily talking about all the choices made to PvP, the slowing down the time to kills, the weapon choices, the entire weapon system changes, all of that stuff. But let's keep it on track with Trials. What has specifically affected Trials that are making these numbers so low? Well, in terms of PvP changes, two main things do stand out, and these are going to be oversimplified, but number one, PvP is boring to play, and number two, PvP is boring to watch. So, number one, PvP is boring to play. This is a complaint that many people have said, and by all means you can disagree with that. I'm not saying it's set in stone by any means, but the main argument here is essentially because time to kills have slowed, because now you have two primary weapons and a heavy weapon that you may or may not get to use in the round. It just doesn't feel as fast-paced. You don't get those epic moments that you did in Destiny 1. Abilities have been slowered as well, which also goes into this entire feeling that's a little bit boring. You're just fighting primaries versus primaries most of the time. And that very much goes into the second point. PvP is boring to watch. This is a big thing. Guys, you will see people on Twitch whose entire channels were based on running Trials of Osiris in Destiny 1, and they don't play Trials in D2. That's insane. Like, that is such a risk to put your essentially livelihood through just because you're having so little fun with Trials of the Nine in Destiny 2. And these things really go hand in hand. They've slowed down the pace of gameplay a lot, and it's not that fun to go onto Twitch and watch Uriel's Gifts versus Uriel's Gifts for 4 hours. It's just not as fun as the epic moments you got to see in Destiny 1. And that's a big factor, because Trials of Osiris made sure that Destiny 2 was near the top of the Twitch viewership pretty much every single weekend, and that was absolutely huge for motivating people to go and play Trials. They wanted, obviously, to get the same loot, to have the same experiences as the people they were watching, and it also got a lot more people into the game. Right now, Destiny 2's Twitch is suffering, and even if you don't like Twitch, guys, Twitch is very highly associated with essentially just advertisement for a game, for getting people to buy the game. A lot of people watch Twitch and watch people play it and decide if that game looks fun based on that, and then buy the game based on their viewership experience. So to have Destiny 2 suffering completely compared to Destiny 1 on Twitch is a big thing, and Trials was a huge part of the Twitch viewership. So that is a factor, I believe. But moving on to more very specific Trials things, I think the number one thing why you're seeing so little Guardians play is because a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you guys watching are the same way, everyone has the loot already. So many people have the loot of Trials of the 9, especially the loot they actually want to get, that their desire to go back and play the game is massively diminished. In fact, you don't even need to play Trials of the 9 to get Trials of the 9 loot. You just need to have someone in your clan or some teammates in your clan team up and then do it, and you also get loot. Why would you be motivated to go through a Trials run and to try to get 7 wins or even to go flawless if you, through Hawthorne, have gotten the Prosecutor, the Adjudicator, the loot you want to get? Maybe you don't have the shotgun, but hey, you know the shotgun isn't that amazing or you don't like shotguns. So you are not motivated to go through Trials of the 9 whatsoever. Whereas in Destiny 1, Trials of Osiris, you wanted the adept weapons, and you could only get them for going flawless. Yes, you could get the weapons normally, which was a good way to keep players who just couldn't get to flawless. You still get the normal versions of the weapons, and they were still very much competitive, but the adept versions looked different, and they had a little bit of a bonus in terms of an extra perk, which was absolutely something worth going after. And everyone wanted these adept weapons, and so everyone was logging on every weekend, not just to play, but to try to go flawless, and that was a big thing. Not only that, you also have a huge factor in the sense that 50% of the Trials of the 9 loot is pointless. And I'm talking about armor, because what is the point of Trials armor? Aside collecting it for how it looks. And if you are one of those people, I'm not trying to disparage you, that's absolutely fine. The Trials armor looks really cool. But aside for collecting it for how it looks, it has absolutely zero practical gameplay benefits whatsoever. Because once you get in Destiny 2 your proper setup of, probably recovery and resistance armor, and you don't care about mobility at all, but that's a whole different topic. Once you get that setup, you just keep upgrading that armor every single time, and then whatever perks you want, you put on via the mod system. In Destiny 1, you wanted specific Trials armor because it could spawn tier 12, which made your abilities recharge faster, which was super important, and it had unique perks. And with Trials, it could even have more unique perks, like special event armor, like raid armor, had perks that other armor couldn't get. And so armor was actually desirable in Destiny 1, whereas again in Destiny 2, there is no difference whatsoever, aside from just appearances, between Trials armor and any other armor in the game, aside from whether it's mobility, recovery, or resistance. Like, that's the only difference. You're not trying to get perks, you're not trying to get, stat rolls, you just don't care about the armor whatsoever. And so again, the fact that the only reason to go flawless in this game is to get a unique armor set that again is pointless because it doesn't have any unique gameplay benefits, it just tears away the motivation for people to play Trials. And that's what we're seeing. That's why we're seeing a ridiculously low player base. Let's not forget, another huge factor is the meta. Also from Trials Report, here is the top 10 used weapons last weekend, the weekend we're talking about in Trials. Number 1 at 20%, Uriel's Gift, then the Antiope. Then finally we do have the Positive Outlook. But you have the Positive Outlook, and then you have at the very bottom the Darkest Below as the only 2 DLC weapons used at all last weekend. All of these other weapons are the same exact weapons you keep seeing weekend after weekend after weekend, and it's not fun to fight Uriel's Gift versus Uriel's Gift for the entire day every weekend. It's just not fun. Bungie had an opportunity to spice up the meta with some drastic changes to how the guns are balanced and didn't do so. And we have no idea when the next sandbox update will be, but it's unlikely to change anytime soon. And this is another bad factor. Bungie needs to go in there every month or so and change up the meta because it's just not fun to fight the same guns versus the same guns every weekend. The sad part is this is just going to get worse. We, again, just had a new expansion, we just had Season 2, we just had new loot added to the game. There's going to be no new changes to Trials for a long time, for months. So this number, there's no reason for it to go up. It's going to go down and down and down. And, you know, before the next expansion, the Warmind DLC, I think it could go below 100,000 players, which is absolutely absurd, but that's a real possibility. So, a dramatic overhaul of the loot system needs to take place. I think that's the easiest thing to fix. They need to add new loot, they need to actually make armor worthwhile, and they need to make sure that some of that loot is exclusive to going flawless. And I'm talking weapons or, again, adept versions of weapons. I think they should reintroduce those, because even though players will bitch and moan that they couldn't go flawless, the motivating factor to go flawless is what made people log on again and again in Destiny 1. And it's all but missing in Destiny 2. And so guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. And if you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.